When outlaws burned her world to ground and left her bleeding in the dust, she thought she'd seen the last of hope. But then, as sudden as thunder breaking across a dry sky, one man rode in, Jack McGrow, a drifter by reputation, quiet as stone, deadly as the desert sun. That night, beneath the endless stars, he swore justice before dawn. The day was dying slow and brutal, the horizon glowing like molten iron as the Texas plains swallowed the last of the sun. Heat still clung to the earth, wavering in the air, as though even the ground itself fought against the coming dark. Across that lonely stretch of land rattled a wagon, bouncing hard over ruts and rocks, its wheels moaning with each jolt. Inside, Clara Bennett fought to keep her grip on the reins. Her sleeve was ripped wide at the shoulder, the cloth dark with blood where a bullet had grazed her. The sting of it pulsed with each movement, but worse than the pain was the pounding of hooves behind her. The outlaws were closing in. 5 men with bandanas masking their faces, their voices carrying rough and cruel over the wilderness. Her chest tightened as she thought of the ranch, still smoldering where it once stood. They'd struck at first light, scattering the ranch hands, driving off the cattle, torching the house. Her father had been dragged away, pistol whipped and bound, promised back only if ransom came. Now they were after her too, and Clara's only defense was a tired wagon and her own desperate courage. The wagon lurched into a deep rut, jerking so violently she bit down a cry. Agony ripped through her arm, stars sparking in her vision. She clung harder, whispering a broken prayer. The bandits behind her whooped and hollered, certain she wouldn't last another mile. And then, like something torn out of a story whispered around a fire, a lone rider appeared. From the ridges to the west he came, his black stallion eating up the ground beneath it. The setting sun painted his figure in firelight, tall and unyielding in the saddle. The brim of his hat shadowed his face, but his very presence carried weight. The outlaws didn't know his name. Not yet. To them, he was only one man standing in their way. But to the few who had crossed paths with him before, the name Jack McGrow carried the kind of finality usually reserved for gravestones. He drove his heels into the stallion and cut across the plains with the speed of a storm. His pistols leapt from their holsters like they were part of his hands, silver flashes in the dusk. One shot dropped a horse mid-stride, the beast screaming as its rider tumbled hard into the dirt. Another outlaw twisted in the saddle with a howl, clutching his shoulder where Jack's bullet had torn him open. The rest scattered, curses flying, their bravado dying in their throats. Their leader shouted to regroup, but the command drowned under the chaos of hooves and gunfire. Jack pressed on without hesitation, every shot clean, every move carved with precision. Within moments, the survivors had turned tail, vanishing into the jagged shadows of the hills. Silence rolled in like a tide, broken only by Clara's ragged breathing and the creak of the wagon slowing to stillness. The wide plain, moments before a battlefield, seemed to exhale. Jack swung down from the saddle and strode toward her. Clara tried to dismount, but her strength was near spent. Pain flared hot through her arm, her legs weak beneath her. She slipped on the wagon's edge, a cry escaping before she felt herself caught, steady hands holding her like she was made of glass. He set her carefully against him, his chest solid and heartbeat strong, as though this was not the first time he'd pulled someone back from the edge. Clara's lips trembled as she whispered, "Easy, it hurts." Her words came small, weak, but Jack adjusted instantly, keeping her injury safe. When he spoke, his voice was low, roughened by years of dust and silence, but steady as iron. "I'd die before I hurt you, ma'am." There was no swagger in the promise, no empty bravado. It was a vow, plain and carved deep, the kind of truth only a man who'd seen too much could speak. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. No one had spoken to her with such care since her mother's death years ago. He eased her to the ground, one hand still bracing her shoulder as her knees threatened to give. His presence filled the space around her, broad-shouldered and calm, scanning the horizon like he could see what waited beyond the hills. With him standing there, the empty plain felt less cruel, less endless, almost safe. As the last scraps of sunlight turned the sky gold and crimson, Jack fetched a canteen from his saddle and placed it in her hand. Clara drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, too grateful to care. Her throat eased, the sharp edge of exhaustion softening just enough that she could breathe, without fear collapsing. When she finally lifted her gaze, she found his eyes on her, not assessing her like prey, not studying her as a man might a stranger, but checking her wounds with a kind of quiet attention born of responsibility. It sent a strange calm through her chest, as though for the first time all day, the ground beneath her was solid. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of mesquite and the faintest hint of rain. Jack's jaw tightened as he looked toward the hills, the direction where the bandits had fled. "They'll be back," he muttered, mostly to himself. Then he turned back to her, his expression gentler, the steel in his voice tempered with care. "We need to move before dark. Can you ride?" Clara nodded, though her body trembled at the thought. Jack gave a small nod in return, like her courage had answered some unspoken question inside him. Together they readied themselves, leaving behind the stillness of the battleground as night descended. The plains darkened around them, stars blinking awake in the velvet sky. Whatever tomorrow held, danger, blood, or redemption, it would not find her alone. Jack McGraw had ridden into her life like a storm, and storms never pass without changing the land forever. The stars hung sharp and clear above them, scattered like frozen sparks against the black sky, brighter than any lanterns or city streets could ever dream of being. From somewhere far out on the prairie, the lonely cries of coyotes drifted to the night air, carried by the cold wind. Jack McGraw crouched low by the fire, coaxing the flames alive with dry mesquite branches until the warmth pushed back against the creeping chill. A few feet away, Clara eased herself down onto a folded blanket, her injured arm resting stiffly in her lap. She watched him in silence, the way he moved with steady confidence, as though this kind of life, open sky, rough land, and firelight, was the only life he'd ever known. Jack came over to her, with a strip of cloth torn from his own shirt. "It'll sting," he warned, voice low. He poured water from his canteen and gently cleaned the wound. Clara pressed her lips together, but didn't resist. His hands were callous and rough, the kind of hands that belonged to a man who'd known hard work and harder battles, but there was a carefulness to his touch. When he tied the bandage snug, he studied her face, checking if the pain had been too much. She met his gaze and found something steady there, something unshakable, the kind of quiet promise that didn't need words. The fire cracked and spat between them, painting their faces in moving shadows. Clara tugged her shawl closer around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the flames as her voice came soft, almost breaking. "They started with our cattle. Then they came for our land. My father tried to fight them, but now he's their prisoner. Today," she paused, swallowing, "today I thought they'd kill me." Jack didn't say a word. He let her speak it all, his eyes steady on the fire, as though every word she gave him mattered more than the flames he was feeding. When her voice finally trailed off, Jack leaned back against the saddle, pulling his hat low. "Men like that don't stop," he said at last, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Not until someone makes them stop, and I aim to be that man." Clara studied him through the firelight, the scar along his jaw, the rough lines carved deep into his weathered face, the calm in his eyes like still water just before a storm. He didn't boast. He didn't shout. He spoke the way some men pray, like the words were carved into stone. She drew her knees close, her voice small. "Why risk your life for me? You don't even know me." He lifted his head then, and the flames caught his eyes like sparks striking steel. "Miss Bennett," he said slowly, "this land's already got too many men who turn their backs. I ain't one of them. What they did to you, to your pa, it ends tomorrow." The way of his words was like bullets sliding into a chamber, final, certain. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope stirred inside her. The prairie wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant rain across the grasslands. Jack rose and moved toward the horses, his shadow stretching long across the moonlit ground. She watched him as he worked, checking the saddlebags, testing the rifle, scanning the darkness with sharp eyes that looked for danger even when the night seemed quiet. Every movement was deliberate, like the fight ahead was already clear in his mind, already won or lost in the silence before dawn. When he came back to the fire, he handed her a tin cup filled with the last of his coffee. She cupped it between her hands, grateful for its warmth. "Where will we go?" she asked softly. Jack tipped his chin westward. "There's a cabin by the river. Safe enough for the night. At daybreak, we ride for your father. If he's alive, we'll find him." His jaw tightened, and he didn't finish the rest. He didn't need to. His eyes spoke the rest of the promise. That her father had already been taken from this world. Someone else would answer for it in blood. A shiver went through Clara, though the fire still burned strong. Something in the way he spoke, quiet and steady, made her believe him more than she believed the sun would rise in morning. She studied him through the flickering light, wondering what kind of past had carved a man like this. He carried himself like a drifter who'd lost things he never spoke of, wounds that never healed. And yet here he was, giving her back a fragment of hope she thought she'd buried. As the flames burned lower, Jack rolled out his bedding on the far side of the fire. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "Tomorrow's coming fast." She nodded, though she didn't lie down right away. She watched him instead. The way he settled in with his rifle always close, his hat pulled low, but his eyes never fully closed, scanning the dark like a man who'd learned long ago not to trust a night. Somehow, knowing he was there, even in silence, made the vast, empty plains feel less cruel. At last, Clara stretched out on her blanket, staring up at the endless sky, the stars turning slowly overhead. The wind whispered through the mesquite trees, soft as a lullaby. Her arms still ached beneath the fresh bandage. But for the first time in days, she felt safe. Across the fire, Jack sat with his back against the saddle, rifle across his knees, a lone sentinel watching over her as the prairie night stretched on. Sleep crept in, and as her eyes grew heavy, Clara realized that the stranger had already changed the course of her life. Tomorrow, they would ride into danger together, and no matter the outcome, nothing would ever be the same again.